She trusted her husband Daniel with her heart, trusted her family with her secrets, and trusted her best friend Vanessa with everything in between. For years, her life felt stable, predictable, and happy. She had met Daniel when she was 26 years old, and from the very beginning he made her feel safe. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He wasn't the type of man who filled every room with his presence. Instead, he was calm, dependable, and kind. He listened when she spoke, remembered little details, and always seemed to know exactly what to say when she was having a difficult day. Their relationship grew naturally, and within 3 years they were married. The first few years of marriage were wonderful. They bought a cozy house together, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and built routines that made their lives feel comfortable and complete. Emma often looked around her living room in the evenings and felt grateful. She wasn't rich, famous, or living some extraordinary life, but she had everything she thought she needed. Daniel would sit beside her on the couch while Max slept at their feet, and she would think about how lucky she was to have found someone she could grow old with. There was another important person in Emma's life, someone she trusted almost as much as Daniel. Her name was Vanessa Reed. Emma and Vanessa had met 15 years earlier during their first week at university. They had become friends almost instantly. Vanessa was outgoing, confident, and charming. She had a way of making people feel important, and she could walk into any room and make friends within minutes. Emma had always been more reserved, so Vanessa's confidence fascinated her. Over the years, they shared countless memories together. They celebrated birthdays, comforted each other through breakups, and supported one another during career struggles. Vanessa stood beside Emma as her maid of honor at her wedding, and Emma often referred to Vanessa as the sister she never had. Their friendship survived distance, busy schedules, and the normal challenges of adulthood. At least that's what Emma believed. As the years passed, Emma became increasingly busy with work. She worked as a project manager for a marketing company, and her responsibilities grew every year. Daniel's career also became more demanding. He often stayed late at the office, attended business dinners, and traveled occasionally. Their schedules became hectic, but Emma assumed this was simply part of married life. She believed that strong relationships could survive busy seasons. Unfortunately, she began noticing small changes in Daniel. At first they seemed insignificant. He laughed less often. He spent more time staring at his phone. Sometimes when she entered a room, he quickly locked the screen. He seemed distracted during conversations and occasionally forgot things that normally mattered to him. Emma tried not to overthink it. Everyone goes through stressful periods, she told herself, yet the uneasy feeling in her stomach continued to grow. One evening she prepared Daniel's favorite dinner, hoping they could spend quality time together. Instead, he arrived home nearly 2 hours late. When she asked if everything was okay, he seemed irritated by the question. "I'm just tired, Emma," he said. Not everything means something is wrong. The response stung more than she expected. Daniel wasn't usually defensive. She apologized even though she wasn't sure why she needed to. Over the following weeks, moments like that became more frequent. Their conversations turned into arguments over small things. Dirty dishes, forgotten appointments, grocery lists, minor issues somehow escalated into major conflicts. Emma felt as though she was constantly walking on eggshells. She couldn't understand why everything suddenly seemed so difficult. One afternoon she called Vanessa and asked if they could meet for coffee. As soon as they sat down, Vanessa noticed the sadness in Emma's eyes. "What's going on?" Vanessa asked gently. Emma sighed and wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I don't know what's happening with Daniel," she admitted. "He feels so distant lately. Every conversation turns into an argument. I keep wondering if I've done something wrong." Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You haven't done anything wrong," she said. "Sometimes men go through phases. Work stress can make them act differently." Emma nodded, grateful for the reassurance. Throughout their friendship, Vanessa had always known how to comfort her. Whenever Emma felt uncertain, Vanessa seemed to have the perfect advice. As the weeks passed, Emma confided in Vanessa more frequently. She told her about every argument, every awkward silence, and every fear. Vanessa listened patiently each time. She encouraged Emma to be understanding and supportive. She reassured her that things would improve. What Emma didn't realize was that Vanessa was collecting information. Every private conversation, every insecurity, and every concern was carefully stored away. Meanwhile, Daniel's behavior continued to change. He became increasingly critical of Emma. He accused her of being controlling whenever she asked simple questions. If she wanted to know where he had been after work, he claimed she didn't trust him. If she expressed concern about their relationship, he accused her of creating unnecessary drama. Emma found herself apologizing constantly. She apologized for asking questions, for expressing emotions, and even for wanting to spend time together. Deep down, she knew something wasn't right, but she couldn't identify the source of the problem. One Saturday evening, Vanessa joined Emma and Daniel for dinner at their house. Emma hoped the relaxed evening would help lighten the mood. For a while, everything seemed normal. Vanessa told funny stories about work, Daniel laughed more than he had in weeks, and Emma felt a small sense of relief. But throughout the evening, she noticed something strange. Vanessa and Daniel seemed unusually comfortable around each other. They shared private jokes Emma didn't understand. Occasionally, they exchanged glances that lasted a little too long. Emma immediately dismissed the thought. Vanessa was her best friend, Daniel was her husband, there was no reason to be suspicious, yet the image lingered in her mind long after the dinner ended. A few days later, Emma called Vanessa to discuss another argument she'd had with Daniel. Once again, Vanessa listened patiently. Then she said something that surprised Emma. "Maybe you're putting too much pressure on him." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" "I just mean maybe he feels overwhelmed. You've been talking about the relationship a lot lately." Emma felt a slight sting of embarrassment. "I'm only trying to fix things." "I know," Vanessa replied quickly. "I'm just saying sometimes people need space." Emma accepted the advice, but for the first time she felt slightly unsettled. The conversation left her feeling guilty rather than supported. Still, she trusted Vanessa completely. If Vanessa thought she should give Daniel more space, then perhaps that was the right thing to do. Over the next month, Emma made every effort to avoid conflict. She stopped asking difficult questions. She stopped bringing up relationship concerns. She focused on work, household responsibilities, and maintaining a positive attitude. Yet despite her efforts, Daniel seemed to grow even colder. Sometimes he barely spoke during dinner. Other times he spent entire evenings staring at his phone. One night, Emma woke up around 2 in the morning and noticed Daniel wasn't beside her. She walked downstairs and found him sitting in the living room. His phone screen glowed in the darkness. As soon as he noticed her, he quickly locked the device. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. His answer seemed reasonable, but something about the moment felt wrong. There was a tension in his voice that made her uneasy. She returned to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Days later, she met Vanessa for lunch again. Emma confessed how worried she had become. Vanessa listened carefully before shaking her head sympathetically. "I think you're overthinking things," she said. "Daniel loves you, you're creating problems that probably don't even exist." Emma wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to believe her. Unfortunately, her instincts continued whispering that something was terribly wrong. The turning point came several weeks later. Daniel claimed he needed to attend a work event on a Friday evening. Emma stayed home alone with Max and spent the night watching movies. Around 10 o'clock, she realized Daniel had accidentally left his tablet on the kitchen counter. The device suddenly lit up with a message notification. Emma wasn't the type of person who snooped through her husband's private conversations. But the preview on the screen immediately caught her attention. The message wasn't from a coworker, it wasn't from a family member, it was from Vanessa. Emma stared at the screen, confused. The message read, "Don't worry, she still has no idea." For several seconds she simply stood there frozen. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She told herself there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Vanessa was planning a surprise party. Maybe they were discussing a gift. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. With trembling hands, she unlocked the tablet using the passcode she had known for years. What she found shattered her entire world. There were hundreds of messages between Daniel and Vanessa. Some were recent, others stretched back months. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled through conversation after conversation. She discovered that Vanessa had been discussing her private confessions with Daniel. Every fear Emma shared with her best friend had been passed directly to her husband. Worse, many messages revealed Vanessa manipulating both sides. She told Daniel that Emma constantly criticized him behind his back. She told Emma that Daniel was simply stressed and needed patience. She carefully controlled the information each of them received, creating misunderstandings and resentment. The deeper Emma read, the more horrifying the truth became. Vanessa wasn't trying to help her marriage. He was actively sabotaging it. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she continued scrolling. Then she found messages that hurt even more. The conversations had become personal. Flirtatious comments appeared between practical discussions. Compliments turned into emotional intimacy. Vanessa and Daniel were sharing thoughts and feelings they should never have shared. Emma felt as though the floor beneath her had disappeared. Every memory suddenly seemed poisoned. Every conversation with Vanessa felt like a lie. Every reassuring word now sounded cruel and calculated. The two people she trusted most in the world had been communicating behind her back for months. She sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the screen through blurry eyes. Her chest felt tight and she struggled to breathe normally. Questions raced through her mind. How long had this been happening? Why would Vanessa do this? Was Daniel in love with her? Had their entire friendship been a lie? Most painful of all was the realization that she had unknowingly helped destroy her own marriage by trusting the wrong person. Every secret she shared with Vanessa had become a weapon used against her. Every moment she sought comfort had pushed her closer to betrayal. As midnight approached, Emma remained frozen in the kitchen, surrounded by silence. The home she once considered safe no longer felt like home. The marriage she believed would last forever suddenly seemed built on deception. And the friendship she cherished more than almost anything else had revealed itself to be the greatest betrayal of her life. In that heartbreaking moment, Emma realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The woman she trusted like a sister had quietly destroyed everything she loved, and she had no idea how much worse the truth was about to become. Emma barely slept after discovering the messages between Daniel and Vanessa. The hours crawled by as she sat alone in the kitchen staring at the tablet. Every time she thought she had reached the end of the betrayal, she found another conversation that made her heart sink even lower. By sunrise her eyes were swollen from crying, and her mind felt numb. She wanted to believe there was some explanation that would make everything less painful, but deep down she already knew the truth. The trust that had held her marriage together had been shattered. When Daniel finally returned home that morning, he looked surprised to find her waiting for him at the dining table. For a moment he seemed unaware that anything had changed. Then he noticed the tablet lying in front of her. The color drained from his face instantly. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Emma could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Finally she pushed the tablet toward him. "Tell me I'm wrong," she whispered. Daniel stared at the screen before lowering his eyes. "Emma," he began. "Tell me I'm wrong," she repeated louder this time. Her voice cracked with emotion. Daniel sat down slowly and rubbed his face with both hands. The silence that followed felt endless. Emma waited for him to deny everything. She waited for him to tell her there was some misunderstanding. Instead he looked at her with guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Those two words shattered whatever hope remained inside her. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "Sorry," she repeated. "That's all you have to say." Daniel looked miserable, but Emma could no longer tell whether his pain came from regret or from being caught. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said. Emma laughed bitterly. "How exactly was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to tell me after you destroyed my marriage, after my best friend finished lying to me?" Daniel shook his head. "It isn't what you think." Emma slammed her hand against the table. "Then tell me what it is." Daniel stared at the floor. "Vanessa told me things," he said. "She told me you were unhappy. She said you complained about me constantly. She said you regretted marrying me." Emma felt physically sick. "And you believed her?" Daniel looked ashamed. "At first I didn't, but she kept showing concern. She kept saying she was worried about us. Then every time we argued it felt like she was right." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Vanessa had manipulated both of them, feeding lies into their marriage until they no longer knew what was true. But as angry as Emma was at Vanessa, she couldn't ignore Daniel's role in the betrayal. "You should have talked to me," she said through tears. "You should have trusted me." Daniel nodded. "I know. Instead you trusted her." He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. The confrontation lasted for hours. Emma demanded honesty, and Daniel finally admitted that he had grown emotionally attached to Vanessa. He insisted they had never become physically involved, but after everything else, Emma didn't know what to believe. The details hardly mattered anymore. The damage was already done. For months he had shared his thoughts, frustrations, and feelings with another woman instead of his wife. Every confession felt like another knife in Emma's heart. When the conversation finally ended, both of them were emotionally exhausted. Daniel left the house that afternoon to stay with a friend. Emma watched him walk out the front door and felt as though she were watching the end of her entire future disappear. The following days were a blur of heartbreak and disbelief. Vanessa called repeatedly, but Emma ignored every call. She sent long text messages claiming she could explain everything. Emma deleted them without reading most of them. She couldn't bear the thought of hearing another lie. The woman she had trusted for 15 years was suddenly a stranger. Meanwhile, Daniel continued reaching out, asking to talk, asking to meet, asking for another chance. But every time Emma thought about the messages, the secret conversations, and the betrayal, she felt the wound reopen. Trust was gone. Without trust, she didn't know how a marriage could survive. Friends and family quickly became aware that something was wrong. Unfortunately, Emma soon learned that Vanessa had already begun shaping the narrative. Several mutual friends contacted Emma with confusing questions. Some seemed distant. Others acted awkward. One friend eventually admitted that Vanessa had told people Emma and Daniel were already having serious problems long before the betrayal. According to Vanessa's version of events, she had merely tried to help save their marriage. Emma was stunned. Even now Vanessa was manipulating the situation to protect herself. The realization hurt almost as much as the original betrayal. Emma had expected heartbreak from losing her husband. She had not expected to lose friendships too. Over the next several weeks the isolation became overwhelming. Friends she had known for years stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. Conversations became shorter. Vanessa's charm and reputation made her story easy for people to believe. She presented herself as a caring friend caught in the middle of someone else's failing marriage. Meanwhile, Emma was too devastated to defend herself properly. Every day felt like a struggle just to get out of bed. She stopped cooking. She stopped exercising. She threw herself into work because it was the only thing distracting enough to keep her mind occupied. Even then, memories followed her everywhere. Every song reminded her of Daniel. Every coffee shop reminded her of Vanessa. Every familiar place carried reminders of a life that no longer existed. 3 months after their confrontation, Daniel officially filed for divorce. Emma stared at the paperwork for nearly an hour before signing it. She cried afterward, not because she still believed the marriage could be saved, but because signing those documents made everything permanent. The dreams they had built together were officially over. The future she imagined was gone. When the divorce became final several months later, Emma felt strangely empty. The intense sadness had faded into exhaustion. She wasn't happy, she wasn't healed, she was simply tired, tired of crying, tired of wondering what she could have done differently, tired of replaying every conversation and every memory in search of answers. During this period, Vanessa appeared happier than ever. Social media became a painful reminder of Emma's loss. Vanessa posted photos of vacations, dinners, parties, and smiling gatherings with mutual friends. She carefully maintained the image of a successful, generous, and admired woman. Occasionally, Emma noticed Daniel appearing in group photos that included Vanessa. Although there was never anything openly romantic, the images felt like a deliberate insult. It was as if Vanessa had taken Emma's place in every part of her former life. One evening, Emma sat alone scrolling through old photos on her laptop. She came across pictures from her wedding day. There was Vanessa standing beside her, smiling as maid of honor. Looking at those images now felt surreal. Emma studied Vanessa's face and wondered how long the deception had existed. Had Vanessa secretly envied her happiness all those years? Had their friendship ever been genuine? The questions haunted her. As painful as everything had been, Emma slowly began rebuilding her life. She redecorated parts of the house. She started attending therapy. She reconnected with a few loyal friends who had remained supportive throughout the ordeal. Healing came slowly, but it came. Then, just when she believed the worst was finally behind her, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Emma received an email from an unknown sender. The message was brief and contained no explanation. Attached was a financial document connected to a charity organization where Vanessa worked as a senior administrator. At first, Emma assumed it had been sent by mistake. She almost deleted it, but one detail caught her attention. Vanessa's name appeared multiple times throughout the records. Curious, Emma examined the document more closely. The numbers didn't make sense. Several transactions appeared unusual. Certain amounts seemed to have been moved between accounts without clear explanations. Emma wasn't an accountant, but her experience in project management had taught her how to recognize inconsistencies. The more she studied the records, the more suspicious they appeared. A few days later, another anonymous email arrived. This one included additional documents. Again, Vanessa's name appeared throughout the paperwork. Emma felt a strange sense of unease. Why was someone sending her these files? And why did they seem determined to draw attention to Vanessa? At first, she tried to ignore it. She wanted to move forward with her life, not reopen old wounds, but curiosity eventually won. She began reviewing the documents carefully. The deeper she looked, the more troubling the information became. Financial reports contained discrepancies. Approval signatures seemed questionable. Certain expenditures appeared impossible to justify. Emma didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but she knew enough to recognize that something was wrong. For the first time since her divorce, her focus shifted away from her own pain and toward Vanessa. The woman who had destroyed her marriage suddenly appeared to be hiding secrets of her own. Emma wasn't sure what the truth would reveal, but she could feel something important waiting beneath the surface. As she organized the growing collection of documents, she realized this wasn't simply about revenge or curiosity anymore. It was about understanding who Vanessa really was. The friend she thought she knew had turned out to be a liar and manipulator. Now Emma couldn't help wondering how many other lies were hiding behind Vanessa's carefully crafted image. Little did she know, the answers would be far more shocking than anything she had imagined. and the secret she was about to uncover would eventually change both of their lives forever. After receiving the mysterious documents, Emma tried to convince herself that she should ignore them. Her life had finally begun moving in a healthier direction after months of heartbreak, therapy, and emotional recovery. She had spent so much energy trying to heal from the destruction of her marriage that the idea of becoming involved in Vanessa's problems felt exhausting. Yet every time she looked at the files, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was hidden inside them. The anonymous sender clearly wanted her to see the information, and the more she reviewed the documents, the more convinced she became that they had not been sent by accident. One evening she sat at her dining room table with her laptop open and several printed pages spread around her. She compared transaction reports, dates, approval forms, and expense records connected to the charity organization where Vanessa worked. At first the inconsistencies seemed minor. A payment approved twice. A reimbursement lacking proper documentation, small accounting irregularities that could easily be dismissed as clerical mistakes. But as Emma dug deeper, patterns began to emerge. The same accounts appeared repeatedly. Certain expenses seemed deliberately hidden within larger financial reports. Some transactions were transferred through multiple departments before reaching their final destination. Emma wasn't a financial investigator, but she knew enough to recognize when numbers didn't add up. As she continued examining the records, she discovered something even stranger. Several vendor payments had been authorized by Vanessa herself. The vendor names looked legitimate, but when Emma searched for them online, some barely existed. Others had no websites, no public records, and no clear business history. Her curiosity quickly turned into suspicion. She began organizing everything into folders, creating timelines, and making notes. For the first time since her divorce, she felt a sense of purpose. The pain Vanessa had caused still lingered, but now that pain was mixed with determination. If Vanessa had spent months manipulating her marriage, what else was she capable of doing? A week later, another anonymous email arrived. This time the sender included several internal emails from the charity organization. Emma's hands trembled as she opened them. The messages appeared to show employees questioning unusual financial activity. Some concerns had been dismissed, others had been redirected. One employee specifically mentioned Vanessa by name and requested clarification regarding several transactions. The response from management seemed unusually defensive. It became increasingly clear that something serious had been happening behind the scenes. Emma stared at the screen for several minutes. She realized she had reached a crossroads. She could walk away and continue rebuilding her life, or she could follow the evidence wherever it led. The safer choice would have been to walk away. Yet after everything Vanessa had done, Emma found herself unable to ignore the truth. She remembered all the lies. She remembered every fake expression of concern. She remembered sitting across from Vanessa in coffee shops, pouring out her heart while Vanessa secretly sabotaged her marriage behind her back. The thought filled her with anger, but she forced herself to remain focused. This could not become about revenge alone. If Vanessa was truly involved in financial misconduct, innocent people could be affected. The charity existed to help struggling families. Money stolen from such an organization would hurt those who needed assistance most. That realization strengthened Emma's resolve. Over the following weeks, she continued gathering information. She searched public records, reviewed financial statements, and carefully examined every document she received. The anonymous sender never identified themselves, but their messages continued arriving at regular intervals. Each new piece of evidence painted a darker picture. Eventually, Emma discovered that several vendor companies connected to the suspicious transactions were linked to relatives of Vanessa. The connections were hidden behind complicated paperwork, but they were there. Funds appeared to be moving from the charity into businesses controlled by people within Vanessa's circle. Emma felt sick as the pieces came together. This wasn't simple mismanagement. It looked like deliberate fraud. The woman who had spent years presenting herself as generous and compassionate appeared to be stealing from an organization dedicated to helping vulnerable people. The discovery shocked Emma, but it also answered a question that had haunted her for months. She had often wondered whether the cruelty Vanessa showed during the collapse of her marriage had been an isolated act. Now she knew it wasn't. Vanessa's deception extended far beyond personal relationships. Manipulation seemed woven into every part of her life. As Emma continued investigating, she reached out to an old mutual acquaintance named Rachel. Years earlier, Rachel had been close friends with both Emma and Vanessa, but the friendship ended suddenly. At the time, Vanessa claimed Rachel had become jealous and toxic. Emma had believed her without question. Curious, Emma contacted Rachel and asked if they could meet. Rachel agreed. They met at a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. At first the conversation felt awkward. Several years had passed since they last spoke. Eventually Emma explained everything that had happened with her marriage. Rachel listened carefully before sighing. "I always wondered how long it would take before Vanessa turned on you," she said. Emma stared at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "You're not the first person she's manipulated." Over the next hour Rachel shared stories Emma had never heard before. She described situations where Vanessa spread rumors to damage friendships. She described relationships destroyed by lies and misunderstandings that seemed to benefit Vanessa. Several former friends had experienced similar patterns. Vanessa would gain someone's trust, gather personal information, then use that information when it became advantageous. Emma felt her stomach tighten with every story. Looking back, she realized there had always been warning signs. Vanessa often positioned herself at the center of conflicts. She seemed unusually skilled at turning people against one another while maintaining her own innocent image. Somehow Emma had never noticed. Trust had blinded her. Rachel wasn't the only person with stories to tell. As Emma quietly contacted others from Vanessa's past, similar patterns emerged. Former co-workers described manipulation. Old friends described betrayal. Several people mentioned financial concerns connected to projects Vanessa had managed. Individually, the stories seemed anecdotal. Together, they revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior stretching back years. Vanessa had spent much of her life building a carefully crafted public image while hiding a very different reality beneath the surface. The more Emma learned, the more determined she became to uncover the complete truth. Eventually, she organized hundreds of pages of evidence into a detailed timeline. The documents revealed suspicious transactions spanning nearly 4 years. Several internal complaints had disappeared without explanation. Multiple employees who questioned financial irregularities had resigned or been transferred shortly afterward. Every path seemed to lead back to Vanessa. Despite the growing mountain of evidence, Emma remained cautious. She understood the seriousness of the accusations. She knew that exposing someone publicly without proof could destroy innocent lives. She refused to make the same mistakes Vanessa had made. Every claim had to be supported by facts. Every document had to be verified. Every conclusion had to withstand scrutiny. For nearly 3 months, Emma spent evenings and weekends reviewing records. What began as curiosity evolved into an obsession. Yet unlike the obsession that often accompanies revenge, Emma's motivation gradually changed. She stopped focusing on what Vanessa had done to her personally. Instead, she focused on the people who might still be suffering because of Vanessa's actions. The charities donors trusted their contributions would help families in need. Employees trusted their organization to operate ethically. Friends trusted Vanessa's honesty. All of them deserved the truth. One night, while reviewing a newly received set of documents, Emma found the breakthrough she had been searching for. Hidden within a series of financial reports was a collection of approval records directly connecting Vanessa to multiple unauthorized transfers. Unlike earlier evidence, these documents left little room for interpretation. Digital signatures, timestamps, account numbers, and internal communications formed a clear trail. Emma stared at the screen in disbelief. After months of searching, she finally had proof. Real proof, not suspicions, not theories, evidence. For several minutes she sat silently in her darkened living room. Rain tapped softly against the windows while emotions swirled inside her. Relief, anger, sadness, validation, everything blended together. Vanessa had spent years manipulating people, destroying relationships, and protecting herself through lies. Now the truth existed in black and white. Yet despite the satisfaction she expected to feel, a surprising sadness settled over her. She remembered the young woman she met at university. She remembered laughing together, celebrating milestones, and supporting each other through difficult times. Those memories were real. At least Emma believed they were. Realizing that the same person had become capable of such extensive betrayal felt heartbreaking. For a brief moment she considered deleting everything and walking away. She could simply move on with her life. She could leave Vanessa's fate to someone else. But then she thought about the charity. She thought about the donors. She thought about the people whose trust had been exploited. Most of all, she thought about how many others might still become victims if nobody acted. By the end of that evening, Emma made her decision. She would not seek revenge through gossip, public humiliation, or emotional retaliation. She would let the truth speak for itself. She carefully organized every document, every email, every witness statement, and every financial record into a comprehensive report. She created copies and stored them securely. The evidence was now too substantial to ignore. Vanessa's carefully constructed image was beginning to crack, and for the first time since her marriage collapsed, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. She felt powerful, not because she had discovered a way to hurt Vanessa, but because she finally possessed the truth. And soon, that truth would reach the people capable of holding Vanessa accountable. What Emma didn't yet realize was that the consequences would be even more dramatic than she imagined. And the woman who destroyed her marriage was about to face the greatest reckoning of her life. The night Emma finished organizing the evidence, she sat alone in her living room and stared at the neatly labeled folders spread across her coffee table. Months earlier, she would have given anything to erase the pain Vanessa had caused. She had imagined confrontations, angry speeches, and dramatic moments of justice. Yet now that she finally possessed the evidence capable of destroying Vanessa's carefully crafted image, she felt surprisingly calm. The rage that once consumed her had faded. In its place was a quiet certainty that the truth needed to be revealed, not because she wanted revenge, but because too many people had already been harmed by Vanessa's lies. Emma spent several more days reviewing everything one final time. She checked dates, verified documents, and cross-referenced records. She wanted to ensure that every accusation could be supported by facts. When she was finally satisfied, she prepared a detailed report outlining the financial irregularities, suspicious transactions, internal complaints, and connections between Vanessa and the businesses receiving funds. The report contained hundreds of pages of evidence. Once completed, Emma anonymously submitted copies to the charity organization's board of directors, its financial oversight committee, and several regulatory authorities responsible for investigating non-profit misconduct. After sending the final package, she closed her laptop and took a deep breath. For the first time in nearly 2 years, she felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her responsibility was finished. What happened next would be determined by the evidence itself. The first few weeks passed quietly. Emma returned to her normal routine. She focused on work, spent time with supportive friends, and continued rebuilding her life. Part of her wondered whether anything would happen at all. Large organizations often moved slowly, and investigations could take months. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Emma was drinking coffee before work when her phone began buzzing repeatedly with messages. Several former colleagues and mutual acquaintances were discussing unexpected news involving Vanessa's charity organization. According to the reports, an internal audit had uncovered significant financial discrepancies. Senior administrators were being questioned, emergency meetings had been scheduled, external investigators had been brought in to review records. Emma stared at the messages silently. The process had begun. Over the next several days, the situation escalated rapidly. Additional audits uncovered further irregularities, more employees were interviewed, financial records were seized for examination. Rumors spread throughout professional circles. Although Vanessa's name had not yet been publicly disclosed, many people within the organization suspected she was involved. Emma felt a mixture of emotions as she followed the developments. Part of her felt vindicated. Another part felt deeply saddened. No matter what Vanessa had done, it was still painful to watch someone she once loved as a friend unravel in real time. 2 weeks later, Vanessa finally contacted her. The call came unexpectedly late one evening. Emma stared at the phone as it rang. She considered ignoring it but ultimately answered. For several seconds neither woman spoke, then Vanessa broke the silence. "Was it you?" she asked. Her voice sounded strained and desperate. Emma remained calm. "Was what me?" Vanessa exhaled sharply. "Don't play games, someone turned over information. Investigators are everywhere, they're digging into everything." Emma looked out the window into the darkness beyond her yard. "If you've done nothing wrong, you shouldn't have anything to worry about." The silence on the other end lasted several moments. "You think you're getting revenge," Vanessa finally said. "This isn't revenge," Emma replied. "Revenge would have been trying to destroy you the way you destroyed me." "I simply told the truth." Vanessa's voice hardened. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Emma almost laughed. For years Vanessa had relied on manipulation, denial, and deception. Even now she couldn't admit responsibility. "I know enough," Emma said quietly, "and apparently so do the investigators." Vanessa hung up without another word. Emma placed the phone down and felt something unexpected. Relief, not triumph, not satisfaction. Relief. The fear and power Vanessa once held over her had disappeared. The woman who had controlled narratives, manipulated friendships, and sabotaged her marriage no longer seemed powerful at all. A month later, the investigation became public. Local news outlets reported allegations of financial misconduct within the charity organization. Although legal restrictions limited what could initially be disclosed, Vanessa's suspension was confirmed. Public scrutiny intensified. Former employees came forward with concerns. Additional witnesses cooperated with investigators. The evidence continued growing. Friends who had once distanced themselves from Emma began reaching out. Some apologized for believing Vanessa's version of events. Others admitted they had ignored warning signs because Vanessa was so skilled at presenting herself as trustworthy. Emma accepted many of the apologies, though she understood that some relationships could never fully recover. Trust, once broken, rarely returns unchanged. One afternoon, Rachel called with surprising news. Several former friends who had also experienced manipulation from Vanessa were finally sharing their stories openly. Similar patterns emerged again and again: lies, triangulation, rumors, emotional manipulation, betrayal. People who once believed they were isolated incidents suddenly realized they were part of a much larger pattern. The revelations strengthened the investigation and further weakened Vanessa's credibility. For years she had relied on keeping her victims separated from one another. Now the truth was connecting them. Several months into the investigation, authorities announced their findings. Financial records confirmed extensive misconduct. Unauthorized transfers, falsified documents, and fraudulent vendor relationships had diverted significant funds away from the charity's intended mission. Criminal charges followed. Civil lawsuits emerged soon afterward. Vanessa's professional career collapsed almost overnight. The charitable organization terminated her employment. Professional licenses were revoked. Public trust evaporated. News of the scandal spread quickly throughout her industry. Opportunities disappeared. Invitations stopped arriving. The carefully constructed reputation she spent years building crumbled under the weight of the truth. Yet despite everything happening around her, Emma found herself focusing less on Vanessa and more on her own future. The investigation had given her closure, but it was no longer the center of her life. She continued attending therapy. She developed new friendships. She traveled more frequently. She pursued hobbies she had neglected during her marriage. Slowly but surely, she rediscovered parts of herself that had been buried beneath grief and betrayal. Then one afternoon, nearly a year after the investigation began, Daniel contacted her again. His message was simple. He asked whether they could meet and talk. Emma hesitated before agreeing. They met at a quiet cafe neither of them had visited before. Daniel looked older than she remembered. The confidence he once carried seemed diminished. After exchanging awkward greetings, he looked down at his coffee cup. "I owe you an apology," he said. Emma listened without interrupting. "Not just for what happened between us," Daniel continued. "For everything. I let someone manipulate me because it was easier than facing my own mistakes. I should have trusted you. I should have talked to you. Instead, I believed lies." Emma studied him carefully. There was genuine regret in his eyes. A year earlier she might have cried hearing those words. Now she simply nodded. "Thank you," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. "I didn't understand who Vanessa really was until all of this came out. Looking back, I can see it now, the lies, the manipulation, everything." Emma remained silent for a moment before responding. "We both trusted the wrong person." Daniel nodded. "You deserved better from me." For the first time since their divorce, Emma felt no anger toward him. The pain had faded into perspective. What happened could never be undone, but carrying resentment no longer served any purpose. They spoke for another hour before parting ways. Neither discussed reconciliation. Chapter of their lives was over. The conversation wasn't about rebuilding a relationship, it was about closure. And closure, Emma realized, was one of the greatest gifts a person could receive after betrayal. As time passed, Vanessa's legal and professional troubles continued. News articles occasionally surfaced detailing court proceedings and financial settlements. Emma rarely paid attention. The outcome no longer mattered as much as it once would have. Vanessa was facing the consequences of her actions. Justice was taking its course. There was nothing more Emma needed to do. One warm spring evening, nearly 2 years after discovering the messages that destroyed her marriage, Emma sat on her back porch watching the sunset. Max rested beside her while a gentle breeze moved through the trees. Her life looked very different now. It wasn't the life she originally planned. It wasn't the future she once imagined. Yet as she reflected on everything that had happened, she realized something important. Losing her marriage had felt like the end of her world. At the time she believed she would never recover. She believed the betrayal would define her forever, but she had been wrong. The betrayal changed her, certainly. It forced her to confront painful truths about trust, friendship, and resilience, yet it also revealed strengths she never knew she possessed. She survived heartbreak. She survived isolation. She survived betrayal from the two people she trusted most. More importantly, she refused to become bitter. The greatest revenge was never exposing Vanessa's secret. The greatest revenge was refusing to let Vanessa destroy her future. While Vanessa lost her reputation, career, and relationships, Emma gained something far more valuable. She gained peace. She gained wisdom. She gained confidence in her ability to overcome adversity. And eventually she gained happiness. Several months later, during a charity fundraising event organized by a different non-profit organization, Emma met a kind and thoughtful man named Michael. Their friendship developed slowly. There were no dramatic declarations or whirlwind romances. Instead, there was honesty, patience, and mutual respect. The qualities Emma valued most after everything she had endured. Whether their relationship would become permanent remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, Emma felt hopeful about love again. As she drove home from one of their early dates, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Vanessa had destroyed her marriage. She had shattered years of trust and left deep emotional scars, but she had not destroyed Emma. In trying to break her, Vanessa had unknowingly forced her to become stronger. The truth eventually exposed every lie. Justice eventually reached every secret. And happiness eventually returned to the woman who once believed she had lost everything. In the end, Emma discovered that the sweetest revenge was not watching her enemy fall. The sweetest revenge was building a beautiful life after they tried to destroy it. And as she smiled toward the future waiting ahead of her, she knew that she had finally won.